I believe that the human being and also life, they're all complex. That's why my presentation is gonna be a little bit complicated. And if you want to remember something out of this presentation, human being and life are harder than we think. Technology is also difficult. There's temperament in the content that you see in the booklet. It's going to make it even more complicated. Next year, I will be focusing on temperament and personality separately. This is the outline of my presentation. Kierkegaard, while he defined the anxiety, when he first differentiated it from fear, it was the beginning point of modern psychology about emotion, because anxiety was defined, anxiety and fear were separately defined. In all of the books, the differentiation between anxiety and fear took their roots from this definition. But of course, not all the problems ended in differentiating these two different concepts. I don't know whether you're going to agree with me or not. We will see. The underlying source of the problems is coming from the fact that we try to understand with concepts, but emotions is not such a world. It's hard to make definitions with concepts, because even when we say a concept, we are not here talking about a constant, because every concept has its own etymology, and there is the object of that concept, and that concept might change within the time. There's a text, with the name of Halil İnalcık. You're talking about stress. What do you mean by saying stress? What are you trying to explain when you say stress? What do you mean? Let's have a look at that. Different names of stress. Problems, sadness, anxiety. These are the synonyms of sadness. What is it? What do you mean by saying stress? I waited for Batuhan to start. Batuhan is a very valuable colleague of mine, assistant of mine. He prepared these slides. I wanted to make reference to him. These are the Arabic words for korku, for fear. Korku in Turkish, fear in English, and these are all Arabic sources of these concepts. Batuhan is is defining modernism in Turkish, but these concepts in Arabic, we do have them in Turkish. And in terms of anxiety, let's say, we say anxiety, but there are many other concepts which are similar to anxiety. You can see here, as stated by Halil İnalcık as well, there are many, many other concepts. Even in English, we do have the same problem, because expressing emotions cannot be expressed enough within a language. It doesn't matter whether it's Turkish or English or Arabic. In English, for example, worrying. It's coming from Old English. It was born from Virden. You see here the history of the word of worrying. It's quite recent. It is a problem, self-problem, let's say. It is the product of a modern English. And the concepts tire us, and we need to be talking about that. But that is the same thing for the society. The emotions and the society are not independent from each other. But what we do in psychiatry is that we handle them separately. The society that we are living in has strong connections with our emotions, but when we look at the sociology, they have different approach. According to David Risman, a very important sociologist, states that societies, like human beings, also have a character, personalities. And people living in a certain period, regardless of social class or group, exhibit similar behaviors and patterns of adaptation depending on the experience of coexistence within the conditions which are specific to that period. And this is a port to which cultural psychology can get close. Not every emotion will be experienced in the same way in all cultures. We have Turgut Özal, late Turgut Özal. He used to start many of his speeches with the same center. Feudal, we start with 3 periods: feudal, modern, and revolutionary period. He understands that till up the revolution, the traditions were the emotions were traditional, and the traditional-oriented person is influenced by his culture and a small number of people around him. And after 1950, things changed. People started to be extroverted. The family lost its importance. And family is only one of the networks, social networks, that the human being has. Inward-oriented person, it used to be that, but now an outwards-oriented person, extroverted people, now that was the idea of that period. This book, I advise you strongly, American lifestyle, It's called as Lonely Crowds. Risman has a student Kroshin. He has a study. Bosnian War period was the focus of his study. During the Bosnian War, he observed that the Western world didn't interfere at all. And he started to look for the reasons of that approach, because the same Serbian people, when they attacked to the West, the Western people didn't give any reaction because there was a massacre just next to them and they didn't do anything. Mestrovic used the behavioral analysis of his professor and wanted to explain this apathy of the Western world against the war. The societies are being manipulated by the media and the government. They don't have any emotional power, energy. They don't have any collective conscious. They rationalize the death, and they are apathetic. You know, they're in between the elegance and the anger, and their emotional worlds are quite limited. And Mestrovic states that there is no emotion here. You might agree with me or not. Emotion is about the society, because the society that you live in defines the emotion flow. And we do have this book in Turkey as well from the Ayrıntı publication house. When we talk about emotion, it can't be understood without philosophy. Therefore, I want to touch upon this very important field. Philosophy. While we're talking about emotion, what's the benefit of philosophy? It is very important in psychiatry to determine what is science and what is philosophy, because no matter what we do, psychiatry is defined as an infant science, because psychiatry itself has difficulty in clearing its own concepts. Therefore, if there are problems in the conceptual world, it might not be a full science. We might be acting as if it's a science, and that's okay. The fact that psychiatry has influences from non-psychiatric fields like philosophy, religion, etc., it's okay. In Goethe, Nietzsche, Hegel, they did have important place in psychiatry, as much as Freud did. After trying to tell you that our job is quite difficult, let me start. Psychiatric states of emotion. Today, emotion is a general expression in psychiatry, and while we try to understand its location, we call it as affection, and we ask, how have you been feeling recently? And we call it as mood. This is the official psychiatric classification. The science is founded on these concepts. However, if we get help from philosophy, a philosopher would be laughing at us. One moment. Okay, I understand fear is an emotion, but fear has many components. Which one are you talking about? Are you talking about the fear itself? Are you talking about the object of which you're scared? Or are you talking about the matter about which you're scared, That would be the questions of a philosopher. When we look at the emotions through philosophy, we would understand that there are many conceptual problems in the field of emotions. While translating it in Turkish, This has been taken from the book of Svensson. It's about loneliness, philosophy on loneliness. Feeling has been translated into Turkish as his. The emotional tone is a little bit stronger when you say his in Turkish for the feeling. But Damasio and Kamberg, in Damasio and Kamberg translations, when we say his, I mean the feeling, it's mostly talking about something physical. The concepts are quite complicated. It's hard to understand in which the physical is more dominant and in which the emotional feeling is more dominant, because feeling has a biological substrate. Psychology affects it. It develops as of we are born. There are social dimensions, but we call all of them as emotions. Again, the philosophers in the psychoanalysis readings or neuroscience readings, we accept them without any objection. But the philosophers, when they think about them, their approach is very different. In neuroscience, for example, both Kamberg and Damasio, they say that these are immature emotions. But the philosophers say that, how come have you reached such a result? Show us. The philosophers accept everything with the question marks, and there is no answer for them, for the philosophers. Basic emotions, it's bullshit for the philosophers. The fear, sadness, happiness, disgustion. A philosopher asks, how come are you sure that these are the fundamental emotions of a newborn? And when they look at the related literature, the concept itself is still being discussed about the fundamental emotions. When you say emotion, do you mean the thing that you see, or do you mean the thing that the person in front of you sees? In Hamilton, for example, the patient feels in one form and you feel in one form. Should they be correlated? How do you measure that? And why do you say that you measure that status? Because if that person tells you, you can only discover it. But there are many people who are not aware of their emotional status. And even if we think that we are feeling the same, when we ask them to talk about their emotions, they mean something else. And some emotions are hard to express. And let's say that your spouse made you a surprise. What do you feel about it? Surprise, for example, is that an emotion? Loneliness, is that an emotion? You saw a nice building, you just came to the hotel and this hotel made you feel good, is that aesthetic, is that an emotion? Nobody knows about them, but we act as if we knew them. When we talk about the emotions, we are making diagnoses, the anxiety disorders, we can put them here on this very slide. We can talk about behavioral disorders. Yeah, okay, I'm okay with that. We can put them here in the list in order to help people who are seeking support from us, but we should know that it's not an easy way to go forward. Kamberg, I just mentioned, he was interested in the emotions and he worked on this topic rigorously. He was also mentioning about primitive and derivative emotions. Our behaviors become more complex with the development of the cognition, and it's valid for the emotions. At the beginning, we have immature or primitive emotions, but as the cognition is added on top of that, with the development of the brain, derivative emotions are born. According to Kernberg, the emotions are mediators. The same thing we see in Damasio as well, but they're mediating in different fields. In Damasio, the approach is a little bit more complicated. We do have that in the book of Damasio as well, in the book of Damasio, which is named as the Descartes misperception. Cooperation of neocortical equipment with subcortical biological regulation equipment is necessary for imaginative production of the mind. This is the basic of his theory. Yeah, this is the situation, but what should we do? If you ask me, in order to get rid of all these complexity, we do have a concept which is state of mind. Human being is always in a state of mind. Instead of putting all the emotions to the affect part, during the anamnesis, we need to understand the state of mind, recent state of mind of the person, the focus points of that person recently, and the emotional infrastructure of that person. We need to be focusing on them, and we need to be understanding the story of the patient. That would be a better approach. Therefore, this is what I recommend to my assistants. I tell them, if you can't imagine 24 hours of a person, including the sleep, even the dreams are included, it's not possible for you to understand that person. You are writing something about the results of the examination, emotional examination, but I don't know what it is completely. Because we are always in a certain state of mind, which is called as haleti ruhiye in Turkish, and we can understand the relationship of that specific person only with the state of mind of that person. These are the statements taken from Heidegger. We are always in a state of mind, but in psychiatry, this is the most neglected part. The emotions are not the products of our brain only. The psychoanalysis falls in this pitfall as well. Cortex, subcortex, and the body are connected with these emotions said by Damasio, but maybe, according to the philosophy, the state of mind relates us to the world that we are living in. If we do have the ability to ask philosophical questions, state of mind neither comes within nor comes from the environment. Dasein is the being in the world. This is the definition of Heidegger. I'm here and I'm talking. My state of mind is directly connected to this fact. We can understand the emotions only from this perspective. We all feel the existence of the state of mind, and we are trying to understand these concepts within psychiatry. Okay, the result. Maybe we should implement a vocational or professional education in which question asking is going to be encouraged. Thank you very much.